Well, greetings everybody to Power Hour Budgeting Essentials. We are going to let's see, let me go here. We are going to talk about how to master the concept of telling your money where to go. So this phrase is actually from Dave Ramsey. So if you know Dave Ramsey, he's a big believer in budgeting for both personal and business. And that somebody asked him one time, well, how do you define budgeting? And he said, it's simply telling your money where to go. So to get this kicked off, let me tell you a little bit about us. So Action Coach is the #1 in the world's business coaching firm. We have more than 1,000 coaches in 81 countries worldwide. We're privately owned and founded by Brad Sugars. Our vision is to create world abundance through business re-education. And we've got over 18,000 businesses each week across pretty much all these 81 countries worldwide that we are in. So we are working with a whole boatload of small businesses around the globe. So with our vision of world abundance through business re-education, we ultimately would like to have every single small business owner have an action coach that they are working with. So who am I? So my name is Kevin Weir. A little bit about me. So that is me. I am from Spokane. Grew up here in Spokane. My lovely wife there is a cardiology nurse at Spokane Cardiology. As a matter of fact, the doctor that she works with makes monthly trips up to Colville to see patients, of all things. Those are my kids. Well, actually, my son, Alex, and he is working for Spokane County Court as a court clerk. My daughter is a stay-at-home mom with 2 kids and a licensed esthetician who's put her practice on hold. And that's our son-in-law, Nathan. So they've got the 2, so we have 2 grandkids. Woohoo! And then that is my son when he graduated from Marine Corps boot camp. So he is now out of the Marine Corps and now, as I said, works as a court clerk at Spokane County Court. So who am I? I am a U.S. Army officer. So I spent 4 years as an Army officer. I had to get my degree from Washington State University. Went through ROTC, got into the Army, was going to make it a 30-year military career. Cold War ended, and we had lots of more officers than we had space. So I got my MBA from Washington State University. 26 years as a coach, 21 plus. I'm actually at the 22-year mark. So now I've crossed the 22-year mark as a business coach. I've authored 2 business books. First Aid for a Wounded Business and How to Create a Healthy Dental Business, and winner of 5 Action Man Awards, which if you probably, to me, you would probably doesn't mean anything, but it's one of those prized awards that we get within the Action Coach system. Most people only win maybe 1 in their lifetime in Action Coach, and I have 5, so something I'm very proud of. So one of the things we always take a look at anytime we do education is going through the point of power and looking at your business and everything. So one of the things we always look at is if you're below the point of power, you blame others for your problems, you make excuses of why stuff doesn't work, and you're living in denial. This is what we call below the point of power. When we want to be above the point of power, we need to take ownership for everything. We need to be accountable for what happens, and we need to take responsibility. So part of education and learning is about taking ownership of your knowledge, be accountable for getting the results, and then take responsibility for that. When you're below the point of power, you're powerless. And when you're above the point of power, you are powerful. So the whole concept, a lot of times we attend to workshops and we expect that, hey, you know what? There's a mentality of, well, I'm blaming others. Well, what about being above the point of power? What about taking charge? So biggest thing we need to do is what beliefs do we have about money? Because part of budgeting is our beliefs. And one of the things that we have to understand is that a lot of budgeting starts off with your beliefs around money. If you have a belief that money is scarce and it's hard to find money, then guess what? you're going to believe that. And you're going to basically create a scenario of lack, loss, and limitation for yourself. So one of the beliefs that we have to have about money is that there's lots and plenty of money out there. What we need to do is, how do I get it and how do I control it? Our problem as business owners is that when we go into that mentality of lack, loss, and limitations, we then basically go into, well, I just need to figure out how to find the money and not worry about controlling it or telling it where to go. So we have to take a look at what we believe when it comes to money, and maybe we do have those negative limiting beliefs, and we need to deal with those negative limiting beliefs before we can even be effective in budgeting. Because one of the biggest things that stops our success in business or success in the nonprofit world is a belief that we can never find money. It's just too hard. Well, once we can change that mentality, the basics of budget becomes much easier in our mind. So what we want to do, because remember this, budgeting is a small portion of what I call money mastery. So not only do I need to know my historic numbers, but the ones that will create my future. Budgeting is always forward looking, not backwards looking. So too many business owners have no ability to make a decision due to a lack of information. So how am I going to make a proper business decision if I lack both stuff that happened in the past and what we want to have in the future? Now, if we want to manage something, we have to measure it. You cannot, the whole concept here is you grow what you measure. And if you don't measure anything, how can you grow it? So we need to turn to both historic numbers and the future key performance indicators that help us get what we want. And then finally, on money mastery, this is both accounting numbers and testing and measuring numbers. And we're going to talk a little bit about, in essence, testing and measuring in the budgets that we put together. So here's a key. We have to understand this concept. Profit is a theory, cash is fact. So what we want to understand is that profit in of itself is that sort of theory. When we do budgeting, at least for me, I want to see budgeting in a cash mode, because I'm going to give you a quick story. I actually had a client one time who came in all upset that his profit, he had all this profit in his business, but his budget, and he had no cash. And his wife was his bookkeeper. And so he comes in, him and his wife come in. They had been coaching with me for about a month or 2 months, and he slams this, profit and loss on my desk, is that this shows that I've got $280,000 in profit, and my wife says that we have no money in the bank. What the flip is going on? And so one of the things we talked about is, okay, what happened to all the cash? Well, come to find out, he had accelerated payment on some capital items that he had in his business. And so, yay, he's debt-free. And then he also had a monster tax check written to the IRS because he had done no tax planning whatsoever. And so the whole idea here is that he had no clue where his cash was going. So when we're taking a look at budgeting, I would always prefer that we budget on a cash basis, because cash is fact. Now, does that mean that we ignore accrual accounting? No, of course not. But what we want to do is we want to know what cash is coming in and going out and budget for that cash, because you can show great profit, but you got no cash in the bank. Doesn't matter how much profit is shown on the bottom line. So we want to budget for cash. And that gets back to the concept of the cash gap. So when we come in, we have So for example, let's say your stock arrives and it's a net 30. So it needs to pay it off in 30 days. And then we get the stock coming in, the goods get dispatched, and then it takes up to 60 days to get paid off of that. So what happens is that then we have an issue where we could have what we call a cash gap up to 90 days. So the cash gets paid here at 30 days, the cash goes out at maybe day 120. That means we have 90 days that we have to basically float our cash. If we do not have a cash budget, we could die of cash starvation and not even be aware of it. So when we're looking at budgeting, I always prefer doing it in cash so that we know, hey, if we're accelerating for growth and we're invoicing and we're doing an accrual system where we invoice and then collect later, we've got to manage for that cash gap, knowing where the cash is coming in and going out. Does that make sense? Okay. So we got to manage that part of the item. So financial mastery. So now just a couple recommended resources before I dive into the budgeting. You might want to take some notes on this, or it will be in the recording that I send out. So there's some recommended sources. One is Financial Intelligence by Karen Berman and Joe Knight. That's a great book. It just goes through some very fundamental financial principles. You've got How to Read a Financial Report by John Tracy. And you also have How to Manage Profit and Cash Flow by John Tracy. So as I said again, these will be on the recording. So you may, if you want to take some notes and look these up, great. If not, they will be on the recording. Now, a couple other books that I actually really like to dive into. Number one is Instant Cash Flow by Brad Sugars, which really talks about how do we get cash flow moving in a business. The other one is Consistent Cash Flow by Tom Palowitz. Now, I know the authors of these two books personally. I love the book. Tom really wrote a fantastic book on how to basically manage the cash flow in your business and what are some great strategies. So I really, really recommend. Instant Cash Flow is a great book, but my favorite has to be Consistent Cash Flow by Tom Palowitz. So definitely get a chance. I would definitely recommend that you order Consistent Cash Flow. Now, the two keys to money mastery, in essence, are budgeting and reporting. So reporting side is the profit and loss, balance sheet, statement of cash flow. I am not going to deal with those today. That's a topic for another day and a lot more depth than I can get into today. What our focus is going to be is the other key to money mastery, which is the budgeting side. So we're going to do a deep dive into that today. I'm actually going to switch back and forth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unshare, and then I'm going to bring up my tool that I like to use in budgeting to demonstrate to you the 4 main steps of budgeting. Okay. So one of the things is that we always want to control our resources by budgeting. Again, I'm going to go back to the principle that Dave Ramsey put out there, is that the definition of money is budgeting is telling our money where to go, both on the incoming through revenue and the outgoing, which is expenses. Again, we've got to understand our cash flow report. Now, on the reporting side, an underutilized tool is that statement of cash flow. Too many business owners looking at profit and loss, but they have no idea how to read a statement of cash flow, so they ignore it. So when I'm working with a client, we don't ignore it. I help them work with the clients to understand the ins and outs of cash. And so part of that then goes into the budget, for cash. So in this example here, we know that we've got equity, a cash position. We're all constantly looking at what is our cash position in our business. So we want to keep that in mind. Now, what I want to do is I want to dive into What are the 4 steps that we need to do proper budgeting? This is where I'm going to go back and forth from the PowerPoint presentation to the budget tool I'm going to work with to demonstrate how to do good budgeting. So budgeting step number 1 is we need to set revenue and profit goals for the business. So the one thing we need to understand is goals should be stretch goals. They don't just plug last year's results, make them ambitious. So when we're taking a look at when we put together an annual budget, and November for every one of my clients is budgeting season. And so I go through these 4 steps with clients. And the first thing is set that revenue profit goal. Too many business owners just want to plug in last year's numbers and call it good. It's like, no, if you want to achieve success in business, you need to grow your business. And I've heard this thing is, well, I don't want to grow my business. Well, just like any kind of living organism, if you're not growing, you're dying. You know, what business is going to succeed long-term if it's just flatlined? No, we need to start stretching ourselves to grow more, get better at what we do. Second thing is you need to make sure you know what your gross profit margins are to set reasonable goals. Too many business owners I find have no clue what their gross profit and therefore their margin, their gross margins are. If you don't know that, how can you do anything? So now what we're going to do is I'm going to stop the share here. I'm going to bring up my tool. So step 1 is that what we have here is here's an example. Let's say, and I'm going to orient you on this budget tool as we go along. So what I do is I've got 4 tabs on here. This is the tool that I invented myself. I took a small 1 tab and then expanded it out. So step 1 is I go and I say over here in goal, I determine the first thing I do is so the first goal you always want to establish is that profit. What is the net profit goal that I want for my business? And so you might want, instead of saying net profit, you can say net cash growth. How much net cash do I want out of the business in the year? So in this case, this person, and again, this is just an imaginary person, they put a goal for $50,000. Kevin, I want a net cash profit of 50 grand. Great. Therefore, what would be your goal to make that happen? Well, for top end revenue, I need 250,000. So we want to make sure that that's going to be something instead. Well, what'd you do last year? Well, I want to do about 20% growth. So I did 210, so 20% would equal 250. So we take the goals that we want and we apply them to the budget. If your goal is 20% growth year over year, then the budget has to reflect that. Now, the second step is so our second step now is begin filling out the budget. So now we start filling out the budget. So the whole thing is we need to start with revenue. So we start with the revenue side of things. We need to make sure that you put seasonality into your revenue budget. Don't just flatline your revenue with the same totals every month. I see this all the time, is that a lot of business owners will say, well, 250,000. And what they do is they grab their calculator and they go, okay, 250,000 divided by 12 equals $20,833. Woo! And they just flatline the whole thing across. Well, here's the thing. Rarely are you going to be in a flatline situation. So you need to look at seasonalities. You need to see the flow of your business to put in an accurate budget process. If you are a business that has a summer slump, but in September it starts going bonkers, then you need to reflect that. But that's going to take some looking backwards and said, okay, what's the rhythm of my business look like? There we go. Now, we need to move on to cost of goods sold to make sure you know what your gross profit is. And then we need then to move on to overheads. We make sure to add in additional equipment. So always remember, if you're going to grow the business, you're going to have to identify things that you need to add to your business. Are you going to need to add equipment? Are you going to need to add employees? What does that look like? So I'm going to stop the share and we're going to go over here. I'm going to come back to the tool. Now, what we want to do in this tool, what we want to do is we want to go over the budget. So what you're going to do, if you're putting a budget together, is you're now going, I know what my goal is. Now I need to start filling out how much revenue I need. So in this case, let's say that we have, 19,000 here. And let's say I'm anticipating a slowdown here. And let's say I'm going to do maybe 16,000, but then we're going to start going up to 17.5. And you start basically projecting what you want to hit your total revenue number. So let's say there's revenue other, let's say 1,000. Again, I'm just going through some examples here. And so we start going along, and then we go, so that's going to give us total revenue. And that way we go, okay, so at the end, we should come up to a total revenue of around 250,000. Now, in this case, we need to know widgets. So let's say that we have, the cost, let's say your product is a widget. And again, all of this can be, changed. So let's say widget cost of goods sold, and you can, if you know anything about Excel, you can put it into a formula. It could be, in this case, it could be, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but let's say I want to do, equals B7 times 40%. Oh, that's not right. Try that. 0.4. So now what we can, and then you can actually do that if you want to, copy and paste all the way across. Or you can handwrite it in, doesn't really matter. So you can do a little bit of play with this. And then what you do is then you go down to overheads. So now what we can do with our fixed overheads is that if we know our rent is, say, $1,000, and it's going to be, and the lease, let's say our lease is all the way through, say, July. So I'm going to go ahead and copy, and I'm going to paste, and I go all the way through July. But the new lease is going to go up to $1,200. You need to reflect that in the budget. And again, same thing here. See. So then what you do is you start going down. Let's say, for example, and the one thing with this tool here is you can always add and make changes here. You probably want to keep this as close as possible to your profit and loss to make it easy. Now, a couple of things before we dive in further into this is that I'm agnostic on what tool you use. If you want to use QuickBooks budgeting tool, great. It's not the easiest thing in the world, but it integrates somewhat well with QuickBooks. What I'm showing you here is a tool that I invented a number of years ago because a lot of clients were saying that QuickBooks budgeting tool is too complex, too cumbersome. And so I said, simple and sophisticated, let's do a simple tool. So now you start going through and saying, okay, maybe I need to add. So let's say another fixed cost. Let's say I'm going to call this big tool. And let's say in the big tool, it's going to cost me, down payment for this is going to be $3,000, and it's going to be a fixed payment of $550 a month for the rest of the year, because I need that to, in essence, grow the business. So now we go ahead and we start plugging in all of these salaries. Let's say that we're going to have, say, 3,600 approximately. Now, budgeting also, you need to know if you're doing payroll every other week, you need to know what those 3 payroll months are because they'll bite you in the rear end. So let's say we got 3,600. And then March, let's say March is a 3 payroll month. So now we're going up to 4,800, 3,600. And by the way, we're going to hire a new employee to facilitate this growth. We're going to have to hire a new employee. So now we're going to put it up to basically 54.5. And then we keep going. And so that's where we need to cut 55. So we basically have to start saying, hey, if we're going to grow the business, I need to add an employee. And maybe we'll do that hiring in this case, May. So now we're doing some brainstorming along the way to figure everything out. So now what we're going to do, so that's where step one in this case, and so filling out the budget, we want to start off with the revenue, cost of goods sold, figure out your overheads. Now, let's go ahead and stop the share here for just a second. Let's go back into here. Yeah, just a second. So now, so budgeting step number 3 is we need to review the budget results. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and go through, you're going to put the whole budget together. At the end of the budget, we need to review the results. So number 1 is we basically, let's say, for example, if you put a budget together and it does not hit your targets. Let's say our goal is 250,000 revenue and 50,000 in net profit. And for some reason, you can't hit those numbers off of the budget you put together. You have 3 choices. Number 1 is you increase your revenue projection. So let's say that you go, ooh, I'm going to have to hit 280,000 to hit my 50K. So I would then have to budget for, I'd have to add revenue in the months and figure out, well, then what's my strategy to increase revenue? The second alternative is you cut your costs. So first one is always, it's easier to increase your revenue. If that's not possible, the second is cut your costs. Okay, what do I need to do to trim the money off of my budget to hit that net profit? The third one is change your goals. Now, I rarely recommend changing your goals. That's, very rarely. The thing is that if you, because typically, I always, when I'm working with a client, it's like, okay, so your net cash profit is 50,000 as a goal, definitely attainable. Your budget didn't make it. Let's figure out a way to increase revenue. And what would it take? Is it going to take 275? Is it going to take 285,000 to get that 50,000? Well, then let's figure out some strategies and increase revenue. The second, it's a lot harder to cut costs because most business owners run lean. Then the third one is change. But again, no, change your goals only if the first or second selection are impossible. So we have to take a look at that. Now, what we want to do then is on step 4 is we want to monitor your budget on a monthly basis to see how the results measure up to the budget. Now, we need to analyze the difference between the budget and the actual result. And I'm going to show you how I use that in this tool I'm working with you on. Then you determine the issue with the variance between the budget and the actuals. So the question then becomes, well, was the budget inaccurate? Or did the budget not meet financial expectations? So now I'm going to go ahead and stop the share. We're going to come over here. We're going to go back to the tool. And now what we want to do, and so with this tool, is that I'm going to click over here on the working tab. Now, what I've got here is everything that I plugged into here on the budget automatically gets transferred over to here. So now, as starting in January, let's say we do this budget in November, early December, we lock it in. Now what's going to happen is we need to start plugging in actuals. So let's say our actuals were 15,250. and on the other revenue, we had 2,600. Okay, and let's say our cost of goods sold instead of 8,000 was 7,150. Okay, and then again, you can go back here, and if you have another variable cost such as let's say fuel, that was the case, or lubricants or whatever, and you had 150, 160, whatever. Then what you're going to do here is it automatically changes it over, and let's say we did 145. And now we go, okay. So basically we have, in essence, what was the difference between the two? And I know I've got a few errors in here. Total revenue. So let's say our total revenue in this case, I'll change the formula on here, but let's say we have 18,000. So now we basically go, okay, what was the difference here? Why did we not hit our budget numbers, or looks like we did better on cost of goods sold? So we want to analyze the difference between the two so that we can start looking at, okay, what's working and what's not working on a budget. Let's say even with fixed costs. Fixed costs may be fixed costs, but sometimes you get hit with things that you don't realize. So one of the things you have to do is, okay, then you put down here, now we have to start looking at the difference between the two and going, what worked or what didn't work? Owner's salary, we thought, or actually, we've got the big tool, and that's not going to be coming till here, but then we need to, again, measure. So the whole idea of good budget versus actuals is we track it, we take a look at the variance, what worked and what didn't work. Now, one of the things I have on here is also what I call a profit tracker. We want to continue to look at what is on a monthly basis, having a roundup that says, okay, how are we doing? What did we budget for? What were the actual? What's the variance? What's the cumulative variance? So we need to keep an eye on a month and a cumulative process and then graph it out. So we want to continue to look at, okay, what's working, what's not working. So that, and just let you know, this tool, this has a tool set instructions, so you know how to use this. So those are the 4 steps of what is done in budgeting. Now, a couple things that I want to go over with you on some of these fundamentals here is that rather than so a couple of things before we start wrapping up and getting into the question and answer session is that it takes about 3 years to get really good with a budgeting process. So one of the things we have to understand is that your first year of your budget, your first year of a budget is going to be a poop storm. Guaranteed. It's going to look nothing like what the actuals are. Why? Because if you haven't done a budget, you're doing a lot of guesswork and it's going to be bad. But that's the whole idea, is to look at, okay, what worked and what didn't work in the budget. Year 2, you're getting better, but you're still missing things. You're missing 3 payroll months. You're missing that, oh yeah, we had to buy this equipment here to support this new line that we've instituted. And then the year 3, you finally smooth it out so that start of year 4, you can literally predict your net profit. I've got a client right now I've worked with for years, and when she puts a budget together and she says, my net cash profit's going to be $250,000 this year, she nails it within 1% every year. Why? Because she's been doing this consistently for years, and she knows, hey, I'm going to get 250 grand in net profit. Now, imagine that you could have that level of predictability in net cash profit. Imagine what that would be for your business. So, first of all, before we go in to discuss in Zoom, what are some questions? What questions do you have off of some budgeting fundamentals? Questions? And come off of mute then if you have a question. Go ahead,
Well, I
Sharon.
have a question.
Go ahead.
Our revenue, our revenue is different than like a retail business or something like that because we operate with grant funds and um, and our income from special events and fundraising things. Um, so it's real, number one, real difficult to determine what it's going to be because somebody else kind of determines that for us, like the city or the county or the state.
Yep.
So so I guess what you just said, it might just take a couple years to get that, to get a feel. That makes it very seasonal too.
It does. So one of the things, especially in your case, is you're going to have to use what I call the WAG. A WAG is what I call a wild ass guess. Now, you could be a little bit more refined and do what I call a swag. A swag is a scientific wild ass guess. So, again, one of the things we have to understand is that budgeting is, in the estimates, guessing at what you want with the target aiming at that number. The idea, and this is what I get this all the time. Well, Kevin, I don't know what's gonna happen next year. Well, you may not know perfectly, but if you can aim at something, will you strive to hit that number? Yeah. So the whole idea of putting these budgets together, even if you don't know the answer, is to put some sort of guesstimate in place, because budgets aren't designed to be locked down, rock solid. It's inflexible. Budgets are always flexible, but you need to start off with a budget so that you can at least identify what you need to focus in on financially in the business. Things will change, but you got to start somewhere. Does that make sense, Sherry?
I really like your Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, just an FYI, if you want my Excel spreadsheet, and I'll do it, I constantly work on it to make it a little bit better. I want you to go into the chat box. I want you to write down your name and your email address. I will send it to you.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so just put your name, go in the chat box right now. Put your name, email address. I will ship that out to you. I've got a few little tweaks that I need to do with it. And then I will get it out to you and you can use it. Now,
I like that it's a whole year.
Yeah.
That you're looking at the whole year and you're looking at the actual in with it. And I think that's probably a good way for us to start seeing, kind of expecting what we have to come in throughout the year.
Exactly. So yeah, absolutely. So yeah. Any other questions then? What other questions are out there? All right, so we talked about that. Time to get into action. I've got one last thing I need to do for you guys is, so here's what I would like from you guys. I'm going to throw a link into the chat. And what this link here is, it's going to take you to a questionnaire on your business. So what I offer is I offer a tool here. So this is another tool. What I'm offering here is a tool to basically, where do I need to work on in my business? It's very simple. You click on finding out what areas you need to work on. It's part of a business diagnostic process that, hey, I need help here, I need help there. It's an excellent evaluation of that. Now, one of the things then from that is, once you take a look at that, then I would be able to look at that and going, what do you need help in to be better? And then we would do what I call a business diagnostic, which is, okay, what's working, what's not working? And then what help do I need to get my business from point A to point B? If I can't help you, who do you know as the business owner who would need something like that to determine, gee, I need help here in my business? So what I would like you to do is go ahead, click on that link here in the chat, take a few minutes to fill that out, and then that will help you determine what you need to work on. It helps me what you determine to work on. And it basically, the whole idea is I want you to be better at what you know you need to do. Part of these power hours is going to be me trying to help you be better. If you know people out there who need help in their business, tell them to get on the power hour list. We're going to be continuously putting the information out there on the Power Hour Facebook page that's going to help you be better. That my mission is to basically help you, the business owner, figure out how you can get your business to achieve the dream of a business owner, which is the commercial profitable enterprise that works without you. So thank you very much. For those of you who filled that in, I will be getting that email out to you. And any final questions? All right, make sure you click into that jot form that I put on in the link, fill that out, and then let's go ahead and I will, as I said, expect an email from me sometime probably later today with the tool. And I'm glad you got that. And by the way, next week we're going to be doing the next power hour is how to pay yourself as an owner. And yes, it is being recorded. The recording will go out to you. So yeah, each one of you who have attended will be getting the recording. Okay. All right, guys. Have a great day. Hope to see you next week at the next power hour. Thanks.